Anna and I have been together for over a decade now. We met online, of all places, on a tech forum where we bonded over shared interests in design and gadgets. Our connection felt easy and natural, like finding a missing piece. Within a year, we were married. 7 years of marriage have gone by in what feels like the blink of an eye. We've built a life together. A stable home, steady jobs, 2 young kids who fill our lives with laughter and chaos. Through financial hiccups, late nights, and early mornings, we've always been a team. Or at least I thought we were. Lately, though, something's been different. Anna met someone new at work, a woman named Kate. At first, it seemed harmless. She'd come home and mention little things like, "Kate told the funniest story today," or, "Kate really understands how hard it is to juggle work and kids." I figured she just found a friend she could connect with, someone who got her, especially in a workplace as intense as hers. But it wasn't long before I started noticing a subtle shift in the way she spoke about Kate. A certain glow in her face, a light in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a while. Then came the late nights. One evening, she stayed at work long after she usually did. She texted to let me know she'd be helping Kate wrap up a last-minute project. No big deal, I thought. I busied myself with the kids, put them to bed, and tried not to read too much into it. But the lateness became more frequent. And it wasn't just her coming home late. It was the way she acted when she got back. She was distant, distracted, even though she tried to cover it with small talk. The real punch in the gut came when I saw a message on our shared tablet. It was from Kate, full of compliments about Anna's personality and how amazing she was. The words weren't just friendly. There was a warmth and intimacy that took me off guard. My heart sank. I told myself it was just a work friend being overly affectionate. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then I read further, and the hints became harder to ignore. They'd spent time together alone earlier that day, and Anna had even invited Kate over to our house, something she never mentioned to me. The whole thing felt like a betrayal, a secret I wasn't part of. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine, either. So, I took a photo of the messages with my phone and decided to ask Anna directly when she got home. The wait was excruciating. I could feel my stomach twisting as I thought of how I'd confront her. When she finally walked through the door, I tried to act casual, but the words tumbled out faster than I'd planned. "Hey, I charged the tablet for you. I think we need to talk." Her face changed as she glanced down at her phone, the tension in her shoulders rising. She hadn't expected me to know. When I confronted Anna that night, the room felt thick with tension, like the air had shifted. She glanced down at her phone and then back up at me, her face pale. I could see her thoughts racing, her mind searching for a way to explain what I'd seen. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, where we'd shared countless dinners and talks about our day. This time, though, silence hung between us like a wall. I didn't let her start with small talk. "Who's Kate to you, really?" I asked, my voice calm but my heart pounding. I knew I had to be careful here, to let her talk without forcing her into a corner, but I also needed honesty. Anna took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. "Alex, it's complicated," she said softly. "Kate's just someone I connect with. We've been spending time together because we're both dealing with similar things. You know how tough my work can be, and she just understands." Her explanation made sense on the surface, but it didn't account for the messages I'd seen. "I don't mind you having friends, Anna, but this feels different. I saw the messages," I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. "The way you talk to each other. It doesn't seem like just friendship." Anna looked away, the flush in her cheeks deepening. She was silent for a moment, and then her voice came, quiet and strained. "I didn't mean for it to feel that way, Alex. It started as friendship, truly. But I guess maybe I crossed a line, or maybe we both did. She's in a complicated place in her life too. Sometimes we talk about things that I don't even talk to you about." Her voice broke a little, and she closed her eyes, as if trying to hold back tears. I could feel my frustration building. Why not? Why talk to her instead of me? My words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. It hurt to think that she would confide in someone else, let alone invite her into parts of her life that I thought were ours alone. I needed answers, but the look on her face told me she was grappling with things she hadn't even admitted to herself. "It's not about you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's just something about her, something that I can't explain. It's like she sees parts of me that I've kept buried for so long, parts one thought didn't matter anymore." She looked down, her eyes brimming with guilt. We sat there in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I felt betrayed, but there was a deeper feeling too. A sadness, a fear that maybe, somewhere along the way, I'd missed something important. Maybe I hadn't been paying attention, hadn't seen the small fractures that were now threatening to crack open into a chasm. The conversation left us both raw and drained, and when she went to bed that night, I couldn't bring myself to join her. Instead, I stayed up, replaying her words in my mind, trying to understand where things had gone wrong. At one point, I picked up the tablet again, going over the messages with fresh eyes. I wanted to see if there was something I'd missed, some sign that might reveal what was really happening between them. One message stood out. It was from a week ago, a simple, "I wish I'd met you earlier," from Anna to Kate. The words hit me like a punch. It was the kind of thing people said when they felt they'd found someone who completed them in a way no one else had. And it was from my wife to another woman. The hurt in my chest turned into a hard knot of resentment. I felt trapped between the urge to confront Anna again and the part of me that wanted to let things calm down. But I also knew I couldn't ignore this, couldn't pretend it was just a phase. If our relationship was going to survive, we'd have to face whatever this was head-on. The next morning, the atmosphere between us was heavy and tense. She avoided my gaze, keeping busy with the kids' breakfasts and school bags, as though clinging to routine could somehow erase the events of the night before. I wanted to let it go for the sake of the kids, to pretend that everything was normal, but it was impossible to shake the anger simmering just beneath the surface. After the kids were off to school, we stood alone in the kitchen, the silence almost painful. She glanced at me, hesitating, then finally spoke. "We should probably talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, and we moved to the living room, sitting across from each other on opposite ends of the couch. She looked small and fragile, not the confident, strong woman I'd fallen in love with. It was like I was seeing a stranger, a version of Anna I'd never known. "I don't know why I did it," she started, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I don't even fully understand it myself. There's nothing wrong with us, Alex. I'm not unhappy. It's just, I don't know. I feel so stupid." Her voice cracked, and I could see tears welling up in her eyes. But I wasn't ready to comfort her, not yet. I needed her to be honest, to give me some kind of explanation that I could grasp. "I get that you might feel close to her, but you brought her here into our home. You hid it from me. That feels like more than just friendship." I kept my voice calm, but there was no hiding the edge of betrayal. She looked down, her shoulders slumping. "I know," she whispered. "It was wrong. I never should have. I crossed a line I didn't even know was there until it was too late. I thought I was in control, but I wasn't." The apology sounded hollow, like she was still wrestling with her own confusion and guilt. But there was something in her eyes, a sincerity that told me she didn't want to lose what we had. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding back, that there were still pieces of this puzzle she hadn't shown me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Look, I don't know where we go from here, but I want us to try and figure it out. I don't want to just throw this away, but it's going to take time, Anna, and you need to be honest with me, with yourself. I don't think I can do this if you're hiding things." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to lose you, Alex. I don't want to lose us." For the first time, I saw a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild from this, though I knew it would be a long road. But in the back of my mind, the memory of her message to Kate lingered, and I couldn't help but wonder if things would ever truly be the same. The days that followed our conversation were a strange mix of hope and heaviness. Anna and I did our best to keep things normal for the kids, sharing routines and responsibilities, but there was no denying the fracture that lay beneath the surface. Every now and then, we'd exchange small, cautious glances, like two people navigating a minefield, uncertain of where the next explosion might come from. After a couple of days, Anna came to me and suggested counseling. "I think we need help, Alex. This isn't something I can fix on my own, and I want to understand why I did what I did," she said, looking down at her hands. Her face was drawn, the guilt and confusion still evident, but this time there was a glimmer of resolve. Part of me wanted to dismiss the idea, to tell her that counseling couldn't magically erase what she'd done. But I also knew I couldn't walk this path alone. My feelings swung wildly between anger, sadness, and a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart from a distance. Counseling felt like a step in the right direction, a small chance to make sense of this chaos. So I agreed. Our first session was scheduled for a Saturday morning. We arrived separately, the car ride over filled with silence, each of us staring out the window, lost in thought. The counselor was a middle-aged woman with a calming presence, her office filled with warm lighting and soft chairs. As we sat across from her, I felt exposed, vulnerable. I'd never been one to talk about feelings, especially not in front of strangers. But as the session began, I realized just how much I'd been holding inside. The counselor started by asking us each to describe our perspectives on what had happened. Anna went first, her voice trembling slightly as she recounted her version of events. She spoke about feeling like parts of herself had been buried under the weight of responsibilities, under the monotony of work and family. She confessed that meeting Kate had stirred something in her, a side she hadn't acknowledged in years, a curiosity, a need for connection that went beyond friendship. Hearing her describe it was painful, but there was also a strange clarity in her words. She wasn't excusing her actions. She was simply explaining what led her there. When it was my turn, I felt a surge of anger mixed with vulnerability. I told the counselor, and Anna, how betrayed I felt, how I'd spent so many nights awake, questioning everything, wondering if there was something I'd missed, something I could have done differently. I admitted that part of me wanted to lash out, to make her feel the same pain she'd inflicted on me. But there was another part of me, a quieter voice, that just wanted things to go back to the way they'd been, to the days before everything got so complicated. As we spoke, I could see Anna watching me with a mixture of remorse and sorrow, her eyes filling with tears. She reached out as if to touch my hand, but stopped herself. I wasn't ready for that, and she seemed to understand. The counselor listened patiently, nodding and asking gentle questions. At the end of the session, she suggested that Anna might be dealing with emotions and desires she hadn't fully acknowledged before. She recommended that Anna spend time reflecting on her needs, her identity, and that we continue to work through these issues together, at a pace that felt right for both of us. When we left the office, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a small weight had been lifted. The problems were still there, the hurt and mistrust hadn't vanished, but there was something comforting about having a plan, even if it was just one step at a time. In the weeks that followed, Anna and I continued counseling, but progress was slow. We were learning to communicate in a way we hadn't before, forced to confront parts of ourselves we'd long ignored. I realized that, over the years, we had fallen into what the counselor called functional roles. We were partners in the logistics of life, but the emotional connection had slowly faded. Somewhere between juggling work, kids, and responsibilities, we'd forgotten how to nurture the intimacy that had once been the foundation of our relationship. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Anna reached out to me, a tentative look in her eyes. "Alex, I just want you to know that I'm trying," she said softly. "I know it'll take time, but I want to fix this. I want us to be okay again." I nodded, feeling a mixture of warmth and skepticism. I wanted to believe her, but the wounds were still fresh. "I know, Anna," I replied. "I'm trying too, but it's hard. harder than I thought. That night, I found myself lying awake, the memories of our early years flooding back. The excitement, the passion, the ease with which we'd once loved each other. I wondered if we could ever get back to that or if too much had changed. The doubts lingered, but so did a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for. The following week, I suggested a new boundary. "I need to feel secure in this, Anna," I said. "I want us to have an open phone policy for a while, just so I can be sure. Just so I can feel like there's nothing hidden anymore." Anna looked down, visibly uncomfortable, but she agreed. "Okay, I'll do whatever it takes, Alex. I know I have to earn your trust back." As the weeks went on, I checked her phone occasionally, mostly out of habit, and with time, I began to feel a slight easing of my suspicions. She was open about her day, sharing details without prompting, and I started to see that she was genuinely committed to making things right. Little by little, I felt my guard begin to lower. Despite the progress, though, there was still a part of me that couldn't let go of what had happened. There was a voice in the back of my mind, whispering that maybe she wasn't telling me everything, that maybe there were other secrets waiting to be uncovered. I hated feeling like this, like a stranger in my own marriage, constantly doubting, constantly questioning. One night, as I lay awake, a thought crept into my mind, a question that had been gnawing at me since the beginning. What if I found a way to make her feel what I'd felt? It wasn't a thought I'd have acted on, but it lingered, a small seed of something darker, something I wasn't proud of. In the days that followed, I found myself toying with the idea of revenge. Not in a hurtful way, but in a way that would make Anna see the damage she'd caused, a way to make her understand the pain she'd put me through. I knew that stooping to her level wouldn't solve anything, but the thought had lodged itself in my mind, refusing to go away. And so, I began a subtle plan. I didn't want to hurt Anna. I simply wanted her to feel the same uncertainty, the same raw, unsteady feeling I'd been carrying for weeks. I started going out more, meeting up with friends, making a point of coming home later than usual. I didn't do anything wrong, but I knew the effect it was having. I could see the way Anna's eyes lingered on me when I walked in late, the way she'd glance at my phone when it buzzed with messages. I was careful not to say too much, to keep things vague, and I could tell it was working. Anna became more attentive, more affectionate, as if she were trying to draw me back to her, to reestablish the connection that had frayed. For the first time, I saw a hint of vulnerability in her, a fear that she might lose me. It was a strange, bittersweet satisfaction, knowing that she finally understood the turmoil she'd put me through. But the closer she came, the more I realized that this wasn't the answer. Hurting her, even in a small, subtle way, wasn't bringing me any closer to healing. Instead, it was making me feel more distant, more conflicted. I wanted to rebuild what we'd lost, but I didn't know if I could do it while holding on to this resentment, this need for retribution. One night, after another week of subtle distance between us, Anna finally confronted me. We'd put the kids to bed, and I was about to retreat to the living room to watch a show on my own when she called out to me from the kitchen. I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the way she drew a shaky breath before speaking. "Alex," she said, her tone soft but unwavering. "Can we talk?" I paused, feeling the weight of her words sink in. I knew this conversation had been building up, that I'd pushed her to this point with my quiet late nights and the careful vagueness that I'd let hover between us. I nodded, joining her at the kitchen table where so many of our important conversations had unfolded over the years. She sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, fingers twisting nervously. She didn't look at me right away, her eyes focused somewhere on the table, as if she were gathering the courage to say what she needed to. Finally, she met my gaze, her eyes filled with worry and sadness. "What's going on, Alex?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "You've been different, distant. I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't know why. I thought we were working through this, but it feels like you're pulling away from me more each day." Her voice cracked, and she bit her lip, trying to hold back tears. Are you okay?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I could see the pain etched on her face, the remorse that went beyond anything words could capture. She looked exhausted, worn down by guilt and confusion, but also by the fear of losing everything we'd built together. In that moment, I realized just how much she'd been carrying, and it wasn't the satisfaction I'd imagined it would be. It was something else, something that felt hollow and wrong. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I knew I had two choices. I could continue down this path, keeping my guard up, creating more distance between us. Or I could finally let her in, confessing the truth I'd been holding back. Anna, I began, my voice low, almost a whisper. I haven't been completely honest with you, or with myself for that matter. She looked at me, a mixture of relief and apprehension flickering across her face. I could see she wanted to understand, to get to the root of what had been gnawing at me. After everything that happened, after what I found out about you and Kate, I felt broken, I admitted. There were days when I couldn't even look at you without feeling a mix of anger and sadness that I didn't know what to do with. I thought counseling would help, and maybe it has in some ways. But there was this part of me, this part that wanted you to feel what I was feeling. I thought if you could understand even a fraction of the pain I was going through, maybe we could heal faster, maybe it would bring us closer somehow. I saw the confusion in her eyes, but she stayed silent, letting me speak. So, I tried to create distance between us, hoping it would make you feel uncertain. Like I did. I wanted you to feel the vulnerability I've been carrying, the fear of losing someone you thought you'd never lose. I thought it would help, that maybe it would make us more even. But now, I trailed off, my words hanging in the air. Now I just feel worse. Anna's face softened as she absorbed my confession. She took a deep breath, her fingers unclasping and reaching across the table to touch my hand. A tentative gesture, but one filled with warmth and understanding. She didn't pull back, didn't recoil from the bitterness in my words. Instead, she held my hand tighter, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. Alex, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I had no idea how deeply I hurt you. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was eating away at you like this. I thought if I just stayed open and tried to make things right, that maybe you'd forgive me over time. But I never realized how much you were carrying. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to push you to this point. Her words touched something raw in me, something I hadn't been willing to confront until now. I'd been so focused on making her feel the same vulnerability I'd experienced that I hadn't stopped to consider the damage it was doing to both of us. I exhaled, a long, heavy sigh, feeling the weight of my resentment lifting, if only a little. I think I got caught up in my own hurt, I admitted. I wanted you to see how much it hurt, to make you understand. But whatever we're trying to rebuild, it can't work if I'm holding on to that. I want to let go of it, Anna. I don't want to spend my days feeling this way, but I'm struggling. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she nodded, understanding. I know it'll take time, Alex, she whispered. I'm not asking you to forgive me overnight. I know I have to earn that. I'll do whatever it takes, and I'm here no matter how long it takes. I want us to find our way back to each other, because I still believe in us, even if it's hard to see that right now. The words hung between us, filled with the kind of vulnerability we'd both been avoiding for too long. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side of the struggle, facing it together, rather than against each other. We stayed like that for a long time, hands entwined, hearts still fragile but somehow stronger for the honesty we'd shared. As the silence settled, I felt a faint glimmer of hope. It wasn't a magic fix, and I knew we still had a long way to go. But maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real, something we could build on piece by piece, day by day. And as I looked at Anna, her face softened with empathy and determination. I realized that for the first time, I could imagine a future where we might both heal, together. After that night, something shifted between us. The bitterness, the resentment I'd been holding on to began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism. I knew there was still a long road ahead, that we would need to confront more pain and doubts, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of genuine connection with Anna, a fragile but real understanding that we were in this together. Our counseling sessions continued, each one peeling back layers we hadn't touched in years. We talked about things we'd buried long before Kate entered our lives. The frustrations, the little disappointments we'd quietly swept under the rug, the small ways we'd taken each other for granted. I learned things about Anna that I'd never fully understood. The pressure she'd felt to keep everything running smoothly, her fear of vulnerability, of not measuring up as a mother, a wife, a person. She admitted that Kate had come into her life at a moment when she felt like she was losing herself, drowning in responsibilities without a clear sense of who she was anymore. I could see now that the affair, painful as it was, had forced her to confront parts of herself that had been neglected for too long. It wasn't easy to hear. Each revelation was like reopening a wound, but somehow, with each session, I could feel the bitterness loosening its grip on me. Anna's openness, her willingness to face her own mistakes and insecurities, began to rebuild something in me, too. I'd always been the one to bottle things up, to keep my feelings tucked away under a calm exterior. But through this process, I was learning that vulnerability wasn't just about sharing pain. It was about inviting someone in, trusting them to hold your truth without judgment. One evening, as we were clearing up after dinner, Anna stopped me. She took my hand, her expression tentative but determined. "Alex," she said softly, "I think there's something I need to do. Something I should have done a long time ago." I looked at her, curiosity mixed with concern. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated, looking down at our hands entwined before meeting my gaze. "I think I need to reach out to Kate and her partner, well, mostly her partner. I need to apologize for my part in everything, to acknowledge the hurt I caused her as well." The thought of Anna contacting Kate brought up a pang of old jealousy, but I knew this wasn't about rekindling anything with her. It was about closure, about taking responsibility and making amends in a way that would bring healing, not only to us but to others who'd been hurt along the way. "If that's what you feel you need to do," I said, squeezing her hand, "then I'll support it. Just be careful, okay?" Anna nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Alex. This is something I need to do for myself, too." Over the next few days, she composed a thoughtful message to Kate's partner, expressing remorse, taking responsibility, and hoping to bring some form of peace. When she showed me the message before sending it, I could see the sincerity in every word, the honesty she was pouring into it. It wasn't just a formality. It was a genuine step toward making amends. She sent the message, and although Kate's partner didn't respond, I could see that the act itself was a weight lifted from Anna. She looked lighter, more at ease, as if she'd finally let go of a burden she'd been carrying alone. This gesture was a turning point, symbolized, for both of us, a commitment to a new kind of honesty. I started to open up more, too. Not just about the pain I'd experienced but about my own insecurities, my fears of failure as a husband and father. I admitted to Anna that her affair had forced me to confront parts of myself I hadn't wanted to see. The vulnerability I'd clung to as a strength had also been a wall between us, keeping me from expressing my own needs and fears. Together, we were dismantling those walls, one brick at a time. Our relationship grew stronger, and so did our connection. We began setting aside time each week just for us. No kids, no work talk, just time to reconnect. Sometimes we'd go for a walk around the neighborhood or have a quiet dinner at home. Other times, we'd reminisce about our early years together, the carefree days when everything seemed so simple. These moments were small but powerful, reminders of the bond we'd once shared and the new bond we were building now. And then, one night, as we sat by the fire in the living room, Anna reached for my hand, her eyes bright with hope. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames, "I think I'm falling in love with you all over again." Her words hung in the air, filling me with a warmth I hadn't felt in months. I pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her as we sat there, letting the quiet comfort of that moment wash over us. It wasn't the passionate, heady love of our early years, but something deeper, steadier. A love that had been tested and found strong enough to endure. Over the weeks, we rebuilt our intimacy, not just physically but emotionally, learning to communicate with a newfound openness. We were honest about our needs, our insecurities, and our fears, and we made a promise to each other that we would keep our lines of communication open, no matter what. There were still days when old insecurities would rise, when a flash of doubt or a flicker of jealousy would threaten to surface, but each time we'd talk it through, reminding each other that we were committed to this path together. The memories of what had happened lingered, but they no longer had power over us. Instead, they served as reminders of how far we'd come, of the strength we'd found in each other, even through the hardest times. Our journey wasn't over, and there would always be challenges to face, but I could feel a new sense of hope, a belief that we could weather whatever came our way. We'd been through the fire, and though we were both scarred, we'd come out the other side stronger, more resilient, and perhaps more in love than ever. In the end, it wasn't revenge that had brought us healing. It was forgiveness, patience, and the willingness to truly see each other, to see the messy, imperfect, vulnerable people we both were and to love each other all the more for it. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And as we sat there together, hand in hand, I knew that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together.